what is an army man doing in education?
So I spent 5 years teaching in my 27 years, and I realized that I loved this opportunity of feeling that you're influencing people. India has this yawning gap in fundamental education, which is school education. I think India has 4 great streams. We have 1 million schools, we have 10 million teachers, and we have 250 million children go to school. Out of the 250 million, when I joined the education sector 15 years ago, there were 21 or 22% who were going to private schools. Today, in the short span of 15 years, they are close to 50% going to private schooling. Can you be in a school and feel proud of being in the school? And if you're proud of being in the school, then many other things will happen. A graders attract A graders, B graders attract C graders. So, uncompromising in the quality of people you hire when you start.
Is this the right trend? Somewhere in the journey, we are losing on the rigor on academics. Are we missing out the time that the students have on the academics, and that leading to a pressure on the students and parents?
I mean, I can do a 1 hour on Mr. Nadar and still it won't get over. A young lady who was working with this business magnate, billionaire, and she had the opportunity to travel with him. And she was like so excited about the opportunity. And she said, it's so exciting to be with you and travel with you. And she said, what's exciting about my life? It's just the incredible decisions that you've taken. So, yeah, sir, and how do you do that? So he said, by making mistakes. The more mistakes you make, the more you learn about the right decisions to make.
It is so funny you say that. Yesterday I was talking to someone, and in our conversation, something interesting came out. Is that people wait for experiences to happen before they give you an opportunity. And nobody wants a failure. But the only way you can get experience is by failure.
So, I had the same moment with Mr. Nadar. I traveled with him from Gurgaon to his house. She was not well one day, and he said, Gopal, you substitute for me. And I've had 3 Rolls Royce Phantom conversations with him in the car.
Right.
Three times I've traveled with him. But I've met him quite a lot in the early days. That's another great lesson. In the first 6 months, he met Shikhar and me every week, every day. For 2 months. And we used to
continuously?
Call them every week, every day, every week, once a week for 2 months.
When the school was up or it was coming up?
No, well before, a year before.
Okay. This was the brainstorming time.
Which is, what are you guys doing? So, and pushing you to what's next. One day, the third of these meetings, SCM is called, Steering Committee meeting, just 3 of us. And as I started, he said, Gopal, why are you telling me all this? So I said, sir, this is the next sort of step. He said, you sent it to me 2 days ago, I've read it. Which means, ye to padh liya beta, ab agla kya hoga? So tell me the next stage. So there were so many lessons, and many things from the top military generals that I've worked with. There were so many parallels in that phase, But the most endearing part was when I met him for the first time, and I was all prepared that
You're meeting the man.
I met 6 people on the way, and I'm going to meet Mr. Nadar. And I asked, I asked you, what's typical attire? So I found that he wears those days formal, the red tie. So I also army dress. So I waited in the reception, and I visualized that. Somebody's going to walk up to me, call me, I'll go and sit in a boardroom. Many people will come, and then Mr. Nadar will come. I'll get up, I'll greet him. And suddenly I found someone walking towards me. And I looked closely. I said, Mr. Nadar, meri taraf kyun chal rahe? So he walked up to me, he came up to me, and I stood up, and he said, Colonel Gopal. I said, yes, sir, it's a huge privilege to meet you. Come. So he walked up, he had a file in his hand, went into the boardroom, put the file down, which was my CV, and nobody else. And that's the first impression that I'm meeting an incredible, different, unusual human being. He said, firstly, he walked up to me. Secondly, he had my CV
In his hand.
Nobody else in the room. And he said, this meeting is about you. In 10 minutes, tell me about your early life. In 20 minutes, tell me about what you did in the army. In 20 minutes, tell me what you're doing now. Aakash, in 1 hour, 10 minutes, the man spoke 3 sentences.
He kept listening to your story.
So मैंने पूरा childhood कहानी लंदन शंडन ये वो सब बना दिया. Professor, father went on. Nothing. Army, NDA, 10 more years, Siachen. Nothing.
No
Not
response.
a word. And I get dogs. So he said, by this time you must be married. So I said, the man wants to know about my family. I said, Geeta, children, ये वो हो गया. 10 और साल गुजर गए. Kashmir, Siachen, Valley, commanding officer. He said, it's like God, isn't it? So I said, how does Mr. Nadar know that in the army we say commanding officers like God? So I said, pardon me, sir. He said, I've heard this commanding officers like God. I said, well, soldiers treat you very special. It is a very unusual
Dearly.
life, and commanding officer is special. It's the best job you can ever get in the army.
Yeah.
You can be a general, but nothing like being a commander. So finished. I had joined Career Launcher, told him what I was doing now. He said, do you like what you do? 3 questions. 1 or 10 minutes. Picked up the file. He said, okay. So that's my first experience with the van. One.
You like what you do. You gave a response.
That's it.
Then he picked up his file.
I said, I love what I do. I love what I did in the army. I love what I do in education, the short 2 years that I've spent with Career Launcher. He said, okay, finished. that was Mr. Nadar. But Mr. Nadar would make, because they have done so little about writing a book on him or his life, and he's reclusive to a large extent. But it'd be great. He is a very good storyteller if he's in the
If he gets down to it.
Unka Roshni also says that it's about which Mr. Nadar shows up today morning. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I've been to a studio where we were doing this recording, doing with Mr. Nadar. Entire thing was set up in his house. He came out in a nice batik shirt. He said, I don't feel like doing this today. And obviously, everything was arranged. And he said, I won't do it today. Won't do it today. It's done. And sometimes he can be an incredible storyteller. So there was, in the early days, that in the Sri Fort, there was this 2012 or so, a big event. He was getting a lifetime award. It's a fantastic story because 2012, India was booming and everything is happening. And everybody was asked in the last part of this video, it's a full house in Sri Fort. Mr. Nadar's on stage and he was getting lifetime award. I don't remember which company, what it was. And everybody was asked, what do you see India in 2020? So from Mr. Mittal to Narayan Murthy, everybody is their take on 2020 India, explosive. Last part comes to Mr. Nadar and he says, a wonderful smile, and he said, I don't know. I don't know what my company is going to be 5 years from now. I have no idea what India is going to be in 2020. And 2020 was COVID, so nobody anyway.
Nobody ever guessed, what 2020 looked like.
So also the, humility to be so upfront about what you don't know. This is quite
No, this is fantastic. And in fact, as we get into this conversation, I think what is an army man doing in education, and I don't know what story you shared with Mr. Nadar when you met him. We would definitely love to know where it all started.
So I think what happened is that, and this is a story of life, and I'm 65, so I look back on life with what have we learned. So I think the fundamental story of life in general, which would be helpful to younger people also, is that life's about a series of choices we make willingly and the chances we get unwillingly. It's the opportunities you get and, sort of what happens. And life meanders along a particular path. Sometimes you think you've made great choices and sometimes it's just by accident. It can include the person you're going to get married because there were 10 people around you and you liked one of them, and that's how life is. So my father was a traveling professor, which is unusual. So very well known professor. He was the first director of the South Campus of Delhi.
Okay.
What South
subject?
Campus, Dr. K.P. Karunakaran, Political Science. He was head of Department of Political Science.
Okay.
So his last 10, 15 years were Delhi. But before that, we were in Singapore. So I was in Nanyang University. And I have a twin, so that's always we. And we came to Delhi in the
Oh, I
ninth.
didn't know you're a twin.
I have a twin.
There has to be a comment on that also.
So when we came to Delhi in ninth, and my professor was the absent-minded professor. He never knew anything about what his children were doing. Never ever interjected in our education. And he wasn't really too sure where the children would go to school. So we went to Springdale's, Xavier's and Columbus and failed all the 3 entrance tests. Because the science books in Singapore, one book was this big, and India, but physics, chemistry, biology was different. So everywhere we flunked the science paper. Army Public School, Dholakwa, had just sort of started. Army had taken over the school, and they wanted 15% civilian children and diversity.
Right.
So we got in, and whatever exam which happened. So I had Army friends. And Army friends ended up obviously appearing for the National Defence Academy test. And I was given a form, say, tu bhi bhar le. So I said, pagal hai, main fauj mein nahi jaunga. I have too much brains to go to the army. Somebody filled the form. Somebody, friend, paid the 28 rupees UPSC
Of that form.
Many years later, I realized that he was a subadar whose salary at that time must have been 250 rupees. But I didn't pay I said, man. So someone filled the form. There was a UPSC examination. I did 4 papers, and I saw 4 movies after each paper. So which means I was fairly flippant about this whole business. But I got selected, shortlisted of, again, 200,000 people, 1,000 people into the SSB. And the most interesting experience of SSB Bangalore as a 17-year-old, 3 days of very incredibly interesting aptitude tests for the army, which is the SSB. 19th All India merit.
Oh, but by then, did you know that this is it?
No, not at all.
Because you had no interest and you reached there.
Not at all. So that's the point I'm making about choice and chance, right? So when I passed the exam, my father sat with me, little balcony of our hired house on the first floor in Hauskas, and he said, army is not a bad choice. And I said, this professor with 2,200 rupees salary, 550 rupees rent jata hai, 200 rupees ka tuition jata hai, 120 rupees ka doodh jata hai. The guy doesn't have money. He's saying one of the kids will go, easier to run.
Let's give it to the government to manage.
He'll manage. It's free education. So I went to NDA basically saying, let me go. It took me, Aakash, 1 week of being in the NDA. So this is meant for me. And that's what great selection is. Because in NDA, in my life, I have never seen an officer unfit for the forces.
Wow.
Because at 17, you're going through a selection process. Whatever you are, even if you don't know, the army knows that you're the right guy.
And they also know that you're not the right guy.
They'll also know
even if you've aced the subject and the test.
So in my entire career, I've never met an officer who's not suitable to be in the army. I've never seen cowardice. I've never seen people who are not courageous as officers, because that's what it takes, resilience. It's through that training, through the process of selection and the training, that you just keep getting the right people. So then I stumbled into the army, loved every moment. It was all Kashmir. So line of control, counter-terrorism in the valley, Ladakh, Chinese border, and the most incredible of all, the Siachen Glacier tenure. Within the Siachen tenure, people like me take pride in the fact that I was post commander at a post called Bana Top, which is the highest post in the world. It's 22,000 feet. It's minus 50 degrees, and you're stuck into a hole, dug inside a hole. 33 days of my life-changing, was spent inside a sort of a snow hole, where you boil ice to make water because you have to survive. So I completely loved the army, and there was no, real thought of another career, and I was successful. I was trained after command of a battalion. I was trained to go into higher ranks. So there's a 1-year course called the Higher Command course in Mao, and I was in a plum job after that in South Block.
Yeah.
In Army
Did you miss
headquarters.
the field job when you were in the plum job at the
Yes.
South Block?
So South Block in so many ways is disappointing. After being so many years in the field, and it's probably a statement of the way this country is also in some ways. When you're out in the field and serving your country, the joy and the privilege is so much within a soldier's life that he takes it extremely seriously. And it's also a whole story about how motivation happens in the military, etc. But it's something which I've tried to carry into school education. But then you come to the South Block and see, the way the government operates and things. That's a bit disappointing, and you feel that maybe you could do some more stuff.
Disappointing because it is not exciting enough every day, or disappointing because of the thought process that sort of goes around in the South Block, which the people on the field have no clue why those decisions are being made.
I think it's not just about the army. It's about you get to see your country through a different lens. It's about that part which is disappointing, that the commitment that you see in the army from soldiers and officers towards your country, you don't see that in the decision-making process, in the intent that you see when you interface. So I can share another interesting story. I don't know if you'd like to edit it or keep it.
Would love to. Yeah.
But Mr. Arun Shuri came to the course which I was talking about. After command, you're selected. There are some 25 officers. You do a 1-year course. You're being trained for senior positions. And that course is all about knowing your operational roles in the future across the border and listening to some of the brightest minds in the country.
Right.
And then you also go to citadels of power, you go to the Reserve Bank, you go to various corporate entities. You see the country. There's a whole 1 year of that. So, and lots of war games also. But through that is this conversation. Mr. Shuri came and I was like wide-eyed listening to Mr. Shuri, and he was still a minister. And in the tea that you have, which is a little more informal, I asked him, I said, it's always incredibly exciting listening to you, but also sometimes it's a bit sad. What number of the 545 MPs in Parliament genuinely care for the country?
What was his answer?
He said none.
None.
This is a conversation between Mr. Shuri and a colonel from the army in uniform in the Army War College. And since it's happened so many years ago, I can probably quote it. And he said, I said, sir, it can't be so bad. So in all seriousness, he thought and he said, maybe 10%.
Wow.
So it's sort of, that sort of thing sort of hits you that, it's a bit disappointing because there is so much you can do. Vidyagan is an incredible story of what you can do in education to transform this country if you just have the right intent. But this is just 200 children every year. But imagine the opportunity we have lost by extending the opportunity for great education for the less privileged socio-economic brackets of this country. And the huge swath of this country who is losing that opportunity in this galloping times of technology and the world and the way the economy is going. So I think that's the sort of disappointment. So that's sort of, and plus I had 2 very fine tenures in the army teaching. So I was a captain in the Indian Military Academy. I was 30 years old and my cadets were 20. Many of them are generals now. And then I later went to the infantry school as a lieutenant colonel, again teaching for 2.5 years. And I realized that this is what I want to do.
Oh, so you realized while you were serving in the army.
So I spent 5 years teaching in my 27 years. And I realized that I love this opportunity of feeling that you're influencing people. I don't know whether you do it or not, but the opportunity to feel that
To transform the
you can
minds
make
of
a
people.
difference. So last week I was at Manekshaw Center in a infantry day get together, and a young general came up to me and he said, Mohit Trivedi. I said, Mohit, wonderful to meet you. He said, for me, it's wonderful to meet my mentor after so many years. So he was a cadet when I was in the Indian Military Academy. So I think that is a great joy which teaching gives you. And sometimes it's even unknown to you. You don't even know the influence you're having on your children. But you know, if you look at this as a test, nearly every one of us remembers nearly every one of our teachers between, let's say, 6th class to 12th class.
Oh yeah, especially the ones who really made that
Especially the ones who
pivotal
made a
changes
big
in your
difference
life.
to you. So it's just incredibly satisfying sort of profession.
And why not continue to teach and stay in the academia within
Oh
the
no!
army?
So I am a frontline soldier. I'm an infantryman. I'm not from Army Education Corps, so I'll never be able to continue to teach. And actually, I suppose Army has its own caste system. The infantry guys are the guys who are the frontline soldiers, expected to be generals and things like that. So obviously, the most pivotal, credible, well-respected part of the army is to command. So you'll end up commanding battalions and brigades and divisions, which is what your bread and butter is. That's your job. And when you go up the ladder, that's what you do.
That's what people aspire for.
That's what you
when they're
aspire to
joining
do,
army.
and that's what you should be doing.
Correct.
And beyond a particular rank, you don't have the same influence. A captain teaches, but even a general in an academic institution is not really teaching. You know, he's administering and things like that.
So when did you decide to switch?
So this happened when I was in Army headquarters. I was in the South Block.
Right.
In fact, there's a very interesting NDTV 40-minute video of me saying that, officers who are doing really well in the armed forces are deciding to switch and move out. And is it because of their disillusionment?
Was it voluntary or?
Voluntary, very much voluntary.
Like,
very much.
you still had years of service left?
Oh, yeah. I was going to be a brigadier around the corner, just a year to go. And
it was a well thought out decision.
It was a well thought out decision.
My belonging belongs to in education.
It was a big punt because at the end of the day, I was 48. I had 2 children to send to, at that time.
Yeah.
I had 2 children to send to school and college, and I didn't have great savings. So again, it's chance, no? Then how do things happen, and then you join the right organization, and the opportunity to join the Shiv Nadar Foundation exactly when they were thinking of education in a really big way.
Which was
around the same time.
Around the same time.
So I wasn't sure why HCL wants to run
but
schools.
You straight away, joined.
I spent 2.5 years.
You had a stint in between.
No, I had 2.5 years in career launcher, which was joyous, absolutely. I learned a
With
lot
Satya
about with Satya
and GP.
And GP. I would say I credit everything about understanding school education by being 2.5 years there. So this was sort of a headhunting call. Someone called me saying that HCL is looking for someone to project head and lead possible schools in HCL.
Which was their new project.
And Vidyagan had just about started, and Roshni had come back from abroad.
Okay.
And Shikhar was the first CEO. So I'm employee code 001. So we didn't have land, we didn't have buildings, and everything started from scratch. And then we hired the team, set
Which
the
year
right
was
culture.
it? How long
2010,
back?
September 2010. I joined. 2012, April we started the first 2 schools. So I was there for a year and a half before.
And before that you had a
Before
short
that I
stint.
spent 2.5 years with
So you moved
Satya.
out in the 2005-06 period.
I moved out in 2008.
Okay.
And
then 10.
Yeah, Jan 31st I retired. 1st of February I joined Satya in career launcher. So it was no break. So I just went straight into, and even CL was just incredible. Satya's an incredible leader. So that's where I traveled the length and breadth of the country, helping set up schools. And we did some with some success. The Hyderabad one, the Indore one.
Yeah.
So...
And there was a time when investment in private schools were beginning to play out, some good schools were trying to show the outcomes, and it was becoming a a credible model to pursue?
Yeah. I think private entrepreneurs and private players, like anybody who seeks the right business opportunity, look for gaps and they fill those gaps. And in some ways, it's unfortunate uh, that India has this yawning gap in fundamental education, which is school education.
Why do you think, after so many years of independence and so many successful models in pockets of India and of course globally, India still struggles to fix the the education problem? Is it the demography that we are dealing with, or is it the intent in the higher offices that we are dealing with, or is it the lack of colonial freedom that we are struggling with, that this is how it has to be done, it has to be not for profit, you cannot make sense out of your business or profession out of it?
So, one is, I think, more straightforward sort of an answer. The second is much deeper. It's like the elephant in the room, which I think a lot of people don't want to talk about. But I think broadly, India, in my view, now this is senior citizen, 27 years in the army, about 17 years in education. I'm 65. I think I have the right to say about exactly I feel. But, I think India has four great shames, four things we should be very deeply ashamed of. We have very many things to be extremely proud of.
Yeah.
We have a great civilization. We have incredible people. We are, when we want to be, extremely hardworking. We have an entrepreneurial mindset. Culturally, there are huge strengths. But I think what we should not be too proud of is, number one, the caste system. It's a whole story in itself.
Absolutely.
Number two
That's
is
one of the biggest banes that the
it's one of the
country
biggest
struggles
bans.
with.
I think the other is the way we have let public health disappear. So there is not enough public health support to large swaths of the country who cannot afford private health.
And not even access, it's
Cannot
not even
even
available.
access.
Yeah.
Fourth, and I'll come to the third. Fourth is the biggest elephant in the room. Nobody ever really wants to talk about it. Is deep-seated corruption
Yeah.
for the last 70 years. It's nothing to do with governments and which governments come to power. Nobody changes it. Nobody can change it. If that's the need for electoral funding, then this type of corruption will continue. Now, the problem with that sort of corruption, which is deep, is that it will change the culture of administration and the culture of leadership. Because if that's not committed towards what it's supposed to do, which is improving lives and improving your nation, then what's happening in education will happen. And once we've crossed the threshold, which I think we have crossed the threshold, which is that once you've allowed public education to decay,
To decay.
and
Allowed.
we have allowed public education to decay. We have allowed public education to decay because if your fundamentals are not right, and your grandparents and maybe my parents have gone to public schools.
Yes.
They spoke well of it. They had fantastic teachers. They had principals, they had administration, they had inspections, they had visits, and they had outcomes. Now, I don't see that in many states of India, because what we don't realize is that we have 1 million schools, we have 10 million teachers, and we have 250 million children going to school. Out of the 250 million, when I joined the education sector 15 years ago, there were 21 or 22% who were going to private schools. Today, in the short span of 15 years, they are close to 50% going to private schooling. And while it's great for private enterprise, but it's not great for the country, because people can't afford the type of schooling which is necessary in today's world. And the government has
Which at
the
least
wherewithal.
promises a good education.
And government has the wherewithal, because schools are, education is on the concurrent list, so it's not the central government's fault. Every state government is supposed to run great schools. But because we have allowed that system to slowly crumble, that today an auto rickshaw driver, son or daughter, or a maid son and daughter, they know that's better to send them to a low-cost private school where the fee is 2,000 rupees or 3,000 rupees, where the teacher's salary probably is 1,500 or 3,000 or 5,000 rupees, is better than the public school around the corner. And I think that's one of India's
And you've
greatest
seen
shames.
this worsen over a period of time. So have you seen this problem worsen over the years, or do you think that there has been pockets of action that the government is taking to solve this problem of not providing quality education from their own quarters in the government
See, I have
system?
interfaced with the government on 3 or 4 occasions. One as part of the discussions and the policy around PPP.
Yeah.
Two, when we were putting the right to education drafts together as part of the CII, we worked on drafts as part of the CII committee. We submitted it to the government. And part of several conversations that have happened around it. I've also been to certain states, talked to state secretaries, etc., as to what is happening. But I think the intent has to be deep rooted. It has to have military efficiency. It has to have military intent, if I may say so. But that's fairly absent. That's fairly absent across. There are states like Kerala where education is pretty good. There are Himachal does fairly well.
A decent job.
Decent job. Delhi in parts. Some of the schools
Has been able to show some
brilliantly. I've been to those schools. I taught grade 8 children in Delhi government school because I was invited and I enjoyed that opportunity. And honestly, Aakash, I could not tell the difference inside the class from a Shiv Nadar school to a Delhi government school.
That says a lot.
Infrastructure, bathrooms, engagement of children, uniforms, brightness in their eyes. That's the opportunity we are losing. And that's what Vidya Gyan and the Shiv Nadar Foundation has sort of demonstrated, that you give children the opportunity, and if you see the Vidya Gyan children and where they've gone and how they speak and the jobs that they're doing now, including at AIMS and including at IIT and including abroad, including at Carnegie Mellon, you realize that it's all a question of opportunity of 6 great years of education and how you can transform lives.
I think for our audience, it'll be very interesting to understand the entire Vidya Gyan model and why it was, created and what kind of outcomes it has produced over the years. And is today's Shiv Nadar School an evolved version of Vidya Gyan, or was it based with a different vision altogether?
Yeah, so both are fundamentally different. These are city schools. It caters to a different segment of society.
Came in first.
Vidya Gyan came in 2 years before.
2 years before.
But Vidya Gyan was much more expansive in its vision. I mean, imagine picking 2 children who are 10 years old from every district of UP. So that's how Vidya Gyan started. 2 children.
It was like a talent headhunting village by village.
So because Mr. TSR Subramaniam was a former cabinet secretary, chief secretary of UP, advisor to the Shiv Nadar Foundation, advisor to Mr. Nadar, it was their brainchild that let's make a difference, let's show what can be done. Because to solve the problem of education is only a state can do. No private enterprise can solve India's educational needs.
Oh, to solve education problem, you need the government machinery.
You need the government machinery. So it is a great opportunity which they chose to demonstrate what's possible. In a small span of 15 years, you can see what's happening. You can see where they're working, see the colleges they've been to, meet those children, just hear their stories. It's just incredible. You cannot make out a difference between many Vidya Gyan children and a Shiv Nadar School child who's got a privileged family background, a privileged school to go to. So I think at that time, now there is another Vidya Gyan school in Chennai.
Okay.
That's to cater to the southern states. It just started inside the Shiv Nadar University
That's becoming
South.
the hub for South.
Inside the Shiv Nadar University South campus. So that's the other school. But these three schools now, Sitapur, Bulandshahr and Chennai, is examples of what is possible.
But while you select 120 or 200 kids out of probably 100,000 kids who want to get in,
200,000.
200,000, even larger pool. So what happens to the remaining who don't get in?
Yeah, so I suppose that's what the state needs to do. That's, because Mr. Nadar's belief is that he can't do scale and width. No private enterprise can of this scale, but you can do depth, and therefore it's a leadership academy.
At least create a model.
It's a creative model, and these are leadership academies. These are students who are going to go out and lead, whether it's businesses or in jobs, and therefore that becomes a spiral for other people to sort of follow, and for themselves to contribute in a positive way to back to society. So that's the sort of model that is.
And I think, setting up something like Vidya Gyan and, setting up Shiv Nadar. So in your journey, especially around Shiv Nadar, what leadership lessons from the army, that you could bring in, and what are the new set of leadership lessons that, suddenly came up to front for you?
So I think, as we briefly spoke, I think fundamentally, again, what's sort of sometimes missed out and which is so obvious in the army, without the word being spoken, is the culture of an organization.
Yeah.
It's not that you'll go into the army and people start saying culture. Nobody says these things.
You feel it.
You feel it. You know it, right? And you feel it because culture, if I'd like to simplify what's culture to anyone, to a big leader or to a young person, culture is very simple. When someone joins an organization, there's one thing that person is trying to see in the first 2 weeks. And that is, यहाँ क्या चलता है और यहाँ क्या नहीं चलता है. That's culture. So if the culture of the army is, for example, the outward ones is punctuality, right? Discipline, right? Wear your clothes properly. But the culture actually is do things well. There is no shortcuts to execution. There are no apologies for making mistakes. There are no apologies. Army, we don't say sorry, we don't say thank you.
Because it's interesting.
Yeah, because you screw up, you put your chin up and take the flak for it. You don't moan about saying, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. You just say, I screwed up, finished. Now you face the flak. So I think the culture of execution, the culture of accountability, mostly the culture of execution and outcomes is what defines, what you learn from the army. It's also a great culture of pride. So, can you be in a school and feel proud of being in the school? And if you're proud of being in the school, then, many other things will happen. You'll translate that pride to children, if you're a school leader, it'll go on to other people. You don't backbite. So there are many, many things, I suppose, from the army that unknowing to me also may have sort of got transferred. But I think it's also just building a great team. And Shikhar did a great job in the initial years of, he used to often say that A graders attract A graders, B graders attract C graders. So uncompromising in the quality of people you hire when you start. If you make sure that you're not pushed by timelines, you will say that we will only hire the best teachers, we will only hire the best principals, and we will wait and we will struggle through not having it. So when you get the right people, they will also hire the best people. Making them feel pride in the institution, I think the first job of entrepreneurs or leaders is
How do you do that? Because
Yeah.
that remains a black box for a lot of people. that I want people to feel happy, grateful, and a sense of pride that, I work in this organization and this organization is known for transformation. So how do you bring that feeling to a new person? I mean, army, of course, as you said, the culture is, यहाँ क्या चलता है, नहीं चलता. But, the world knows the army culture now, even if they've not been into the army, how that culture message has gone out, with the word of mouth or with the examples that have been set by the army. So how are you building, or how did you build that, sense of pride as a culture in Shiv Nadar?
So I think...
please feel free to, share some stories, anecdotes, that may throw some light into the thought process.
Yeah, okay. So let me use some army phrases.
Yeah.
One is that be in the trench yourself. So one is to say that, okay, so what, I was in the colonel in the army, that's what you think I can do, but I can teach, So you demonstrate teaching, and I think that goes.
And you took
well.
upon it.
Oh yeah. I actually got certified as one of India's best social studies teacher in middle school through an All India Center sort of test, and I think the teachers respected me a great deal, saying that okay, he's also gone and done a 3-hour online test, and it was All India.
He's one of us.
He's one of us. So
he will relate to our pains and issues and problems.
Yeah, it's a bit of that All India thing, but I think it's also obviously you have to be conscious of pay and perks and privileges, and you have to say that, okay, we will get there. It is an advantage to be extremely well funded, to have great visionary trustees who say, we're going to build the best, so let's
no
not
compromise.
Hold back.
Yeah.
So that helps. I mean, everybody doesn't have that advantage, and I suppose we had that big start-up advantage to say, we will be the best when it comes to pay and perks and privileges. For example, we have a insurance for teachers, which is 7 lakh annual coverage, which includes not only them and their husbands mainly, or spouses, their children, but also their in-laws. Wow. So it's a huge privilege, and it's fantastic to say, father-in-law, my insurance covers you, so that's a great privilege. But I think apart from that aspect, it's about respect and trust. It's about how do you have a culture of respect and trust. And again, Shikha used to say that we will, right in the beginning, we will respect everyone from P to P. So when you have a trustee who says, I will respect everyone from a peon to a president, it's all those little things you do, never have separate chairs for you. So many little things you do. When you look at the early days, I suppose it's, I'm one of you, right? And we will do things together. So there's no exalted status for an owner or a leader, and I think it's a lot to do with that. But I think building culture in an institution is central to building a great institution. And there is also, for example, a culture of learning and curiosity. So the only thing we ever gift in Shiv Nadar School is books. We have no other gifts. We also don't accept any other gifts, but the only thing we ever give to each other is books. But it's also translated into a culture of learning and curiosity and sharing books and having book lovers club and things like that. The other interesting culture we built, and I think these little things matter. It may seem overdone and looks a bit funny, but we have a culture of fitness.
Culture of fitness.
Fitness.
Is it a new thing after COVID, or this was
from
ingrained
the beginning,
from day one?
I'll tell you a funny story. We have in our teachers recognition event, which is annual, we have something called a Green Apple Award.
Okay.
So it's a proper award which has a green apple and it's awarded. In the early days, it was for those people who lost the most weight.
Okay.
So today, I'm not sure if the young people like this stuff I'm trying to. But it was taken on brilliantly by people, and there were people who lost like 19 kilos in 3 weeks and said, this is good for us, and you're pushing us to do this.
Yeah.
But it's also now more about fitness. There are fitness tests, there are 100 meters runs, there are sit-ups to be done, and you compete in your age category. There's male category, female, every single year.
This is what you're talking, the school team or
School
children also?
teachers,
Oh,
teachers,
teachers. Okay.
teachers. Annual. So it's an annual in our rewards and recognition. But we just said your health matters to us. And when COVID happened, it struck everybody.
Got re-emphasized.
Because the fit people who are not so fit had trouble.
Yeah.
But those who were physically fit came through well.
Yeah.
So it's also cultural. So we have inter-school teachers sports competitions, which is an Olympic event. We call it SNS Olympics.
Oh.
Yes. And
Shiv Nadar School Olympics.
yes, and Noida, I think, is the current winner. So,
Oh. It's
So-
inter-school.
inter-school, there are about 1,000 people who take part in various events. So it's also, so I suppose when you build culture, you have to also pick what resonates with people. Reading obviously resonates with education. It's about learning and improvement. But fitness is also about yourself and that we care. So I think you also pick those things. Army does this sort of brilliantly. I think that's part of it. But it's also about leadership being accessible. It's about listening. We take staff feedback very seriously. We have something called a peer review, which unknown to you, 15 people, including the CEO, are rated.
Okay.
They will rate you. You don't know who's rated you, but you get a summary of
And
how you are,
feedback, like comments.
how you are in transparency, how you are in commitment to excellence, and a set of 5 parameters which we hold very very dear. How you are in curiosity, do you have favorites, and things like that. So I think all that translate into the culture that you want to build.
And did this culture, that came about, attracted a certain set of parents, or was it the early set of parents that influenced this culture making?
So the way we approach the parents as a community, and that's where the social transformation aspect comes in. We, again, in our early days, Shikhar and I had this conversation, and both of us are not from education. Shikhar was in the automobile sector before, and I am from the army. And I was a little more experienced because I did 2.5 years in career launch, and I taught for 5 years. But I said, Shikhar, most schools keep their parents outside the gate. You can't go in through the gate unless you have an appointment and somebody calls you.
Which I never understood. I've been to schools globally. They are so welcoming. I mean, they are not forts. They are, they're open arms and they interact and they want to know you. They want to tell about their school and history. Whereas, you go to some of the Indian schools, the guard just shuts you off. It's not allowed to enter. As if, we're going to go in and, commit a crime.
So every parent at Shiv Nadar School has an identity card, and all you need is an identity card to come through the gate.
Yeah.
And you can go straight in and meet people. But more than that, we've created a culture where parents are part of the school. So we have what is called a parent relationship officer. So that persons and her department, it's not just one person. They're called PPOs. So they are responsible for all parent-related activities. We have parent collectives where parents can choose many areas, and the Gurgaon school has, out of 2,000 parents, there are 1,000 people who have enrolled for various aspects of the parent collective, including book lovers club, theatre club, music club, trekking club, movie lovers club. So there's a whole assortment of collectives that you can be part of. But it's also from fundamental research, like you said, in the West, that wherever parents and schools are seen as working together in consonance,
collaborate,
the student outcomes are better.
Better.
So it's also the community that you're building. So I suppose a lot of the reputation of what happens inside the Shiv Nadar School gets translated through parents who've been with us. And I think our word of mouth happens because of our parents and now, of course, children. and how children are seen around in the society where they live, etc. So yes, a lot of that has happened.
And, you know, in our times, and probably at your time also, schools were seen as place for education and massive focus was on academics.
Yeah.
But over the years, the schools have become places of holistic development. And is this the right trend? I know that holistic development is important, but is there somewhere in the journey we are losing on the rigor on academics? Especially, the new age schools, if I talk about, I mean, parents are happy, they're loving it, and, they get to meet the teacher, they get to interact with them, they can communicate through WhatsApps and groups and apps and everything. Very open culture, very, very conversational. All of this is great. But are we in a bid to give them exposure to the treks and to the, the new learning exposures? Are we missing out the time that the students have on the academics, and that leading to a pressure on the students and parents?
Yeah, I suppose time, you're right, time is finite. There's, regardless of anything else which happens in the world,
You have to do it in those morning to afternoon.
there is social media to contend with, and how much hours that will go in there. That's a whole story there. But I think in terms of academic outcomes, which in my belief, in our school's belief, is one part of schooling. It's not the whole part of schooling.
When you say one part, and I hear it a lot,
yeah,
how important that part, if you were to sort of on a scale of 1 to 10 or 100%, how relevant is academic as part?
Yeah, so firstly, very relevant, right? In fact, I spoke to grade 11 the other day and I told them why academics are important. And today's world, in a CBSE school, they know that they have to do CUET to get into a public university. They know they have to go and do their engineering test if they want to go to engineering. They know that they have to go NDA and do an NDA test. Or a plethora of law tests, etc. Right? So they will ask themselves, how important is my 12th class result, right?
Yeah.
So the 12th class result is a test about yourself. How much can you push yourself? How much can you push yourself through an academic regimen of hard work and commitment to be able to show that I can be committed and I will live up to the potential that I have. And that goes down very well with children. So at Shiv Nadar School, it's uncompromising. We have, for example, 86% as class average. We are fairly happy with. We have...
this is the board performance.
Board performance. We
12th
have
board.
12th board. We have over 40% above 90. We said that's mandatory. So that's school goals. It's part of the goals.
Okay.
I must tell you, Vidya Gyan would have 60% above 90.
Above
it's
90.
Incredible. They're the best CBSE school in the country
in
terms of academics. So, I mean, they know that they have to do extremely well.
Yeah.
But I think this is centered around what should be in any great school, is centered around tough love. That while you care, but you have to be uncompromising as a school leader or as a teacher to say, this matters. So I don't think it's unimportant. It's extremely important because those are as much life lessons as anything else. So,
but does it get cornered towards, while you come in 12th and it's taken lightly, let's say grade 7, 8, 9?
So
there is more things to do.
So in the way we do the program, we have a program called AHA, which is a very interesting program, and it's probably pioneered by the Shiv Nadar School. In grade 3, 8-year-olds get an opportunity to go through many baskets of music, art, theatre, dance, and football, basketball, badminton, table tennis, now fencing, etc. And after that entire grade 3 exposure, in grade 4, they choose which AHA basket. And that AHA basket is inter-class. It's grade 4, 5 and 6 will be together. So the whole school's calendar is made a way that you will go to your AHA basket that you choose. Now the idea there is to be immersive in something that they would be deeply passionate about and which is deeply who they are. So initially we thought they will refer to their parents and say, Mama, what should I choose? We realized that 80% of the children never asked anyone. Because of that experience, inherently they said, basketball's like good for me or dance is good for me. And then in the subsequent classes, when they choose, every 6 months they can change a basket and say, okay, I'm bored with this and let me go. But we realized that again, 80-90% were not changing their basket. So you get 6 years of Bharatnatyam, or you get 6 years of, let's say, Western music, or 6 years of basketball. So if you're deeply passionate, and I think that's a huge need, when you're deeply passionate of something, your privileged background doesn't matter. अगर आपको एक्सेल करना है तो आपको पता है ग्राउंड के अंदर तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, मेहनत करना पड़ेगा.
Correct.
That guy is better than me in basketball, is better. That team is better than me, they licked us. So that is extremely important, you know. And then when that happens, I think that gets translated into excellence in academics also, because you're pushing yourself here, you know that you're going to push yourself there. And our sports heads always say that the best sports kid do well in academics. So it's a fallacy to say that that doesn't happen. But I think you can't compromise on not doing well in academics. You have to do well in academics. Any good school has to push that way. Maybe there are some changes in the academic examination system that should happen, and I think CBSE is also doing a brilliant job in transforming the way questions are being asked, and you know, the nature of questions, etc. So I think but it is important.
So, you know, we've always, when it comes to academics, you know, there's always a difference in understanding, you know, what is education and what is learning. So for Shiv Nadar, you know, when you get down to the ground in executing the curriculum, you know, if I can, you know, focus only on the curriculum part here in this question. So how do you differentiate between educating student and building the learning capabilities, which are absolutely different and mostly get confused, and people tend to focus only on education and forget that, and or maybe sort of take it for granted that, you know, learning would take place. You know, these kids been in school and they know how to do it, and that's where most kids struggle.
I think in many ways we are at a cusp probably across the world with AI, generative AI, machine learning. I mean, that cusp is just sort of happening in learning. I think every school, every educational institution will need to wrestle with that. In fact, one of my favorite opportunities to interact with children, and I did this recently, is about two things. One, I call it Kamita, which I love acronyms, so I throw it on the board and say, crack it and you'll get chocolates. But Kamita is that questions are more important than answers. And therefore, are you asking the right questions? Because if you're asking the right questions in the world of AI, where Google has every answer, what is the type of questions you're asking?
They'll matter more.
Matters. And therefore, the best kids are the ones who are asking the right questions. So what are the questions you're asking? And then we go into what is called non-Googleable questions and saying, what's not Googleable? And children incredibly come up with some, in just such deep, grade 6 in the Faridabad school, that group came up with saying, does God exist? What's the purpose of life? Now, if
these are grade 6 kids.
Grade 6 group. So we had a little competition. So we'll write it on the board. We'll vote for each other and say which one is the best question. So it stunned me that a grade 6 group of kids could come up with, after 3 minutes of collaboration and chatting, what's the purpose of life? So if children are asking those questions, I think that's what education should be, because critical thinking is about that. Are you asking the right questions? Every great invention or discovery has happened when people have asked the right questions and seen
the difficult
opportunities.
ones.
Is the difficult ones. And of course, you can throw in things like, to make it interesting, that why do I fall in love with that girl? There's so many. Google doesn't know, and I don't seem to know. Why is it that someone can tickle me, but I can't tickle myself? And Google doesn't know that. So I think much of discovery in the future is going to be around the humanness of our condition. You know, what's deeply human. and being able to connect with that and understanding how the brain works is still sort of out there, how genes work. And so I think there's a lot to do on those areas, and I think that's what a school should be doing, because the ability to transcribe what is in a textbook into an examination paper, it's not necessarily academics.
Right.
And we've got to figure that.
Absolutely. And, to your point of how this whole landscape for education is changing, and I mean, schools have to be on the toes to understand what is the changing relevance, changing expectation and demand, not only of the parent, but also the industry going forward. And how do we change ourselves in handling the generation that it is, which apparently, no doubt, is way smarter than the earlier generation, way more informed, and way more distracted. Although the objectives and the goals of lives haven't changed in the parlances of achievement and success, and so has not changed on the challenges around failure and missing out on the opportunities. So how are you seeing this as somebody who's running so many schools and so entrenched in the education ecosystem? What are the challenges you see that you will have to go through, in changing ecosystem of learning and education, and B, around technology that is becoming a bane and a boon both? And how do you use it wisely while protect that it doesn't consume the student and sort of destroys the academic excellence culture that has grown in last so many centuries?
Yeah, I think those are all huge challenges today. I think the mental aspect of a student's growth, the emotional aspects of a student growth in today's world is it's a massive sort of situation and challenge. It's born of many factors, and I think India is a mix of probably many ages and generations and socio-economic parameters. What's applicable to a government school in rural UP to what happens in a Gurgaon school would be quite different, and the challenges for children would be quite different. But I think I have short answers, not necessarily the best ones, but I think one is what I spoke about, that if people are deeply passionate about something between the age of 18 and 14, they will be well set. I was in a recent panel where they said exactly what you asked, that how are you preparing children to go into the workspace, and what are the gaps? So obviously much of that skilling gap and knowledge gap is to be addressed by a college or a university.
Right.
But interestingly, much psychological research suggests that the way you are attitudinally is shaped by the time you're 18, 80%. You're not going to change that part.
So shouldn't that skilling
Happen at
be
school.
answered
Exactly.
at
So
school?
I asked the moderator that, since you discussed this, is actually somebody senior in HCL who was saying that this is what we see at the workspace. And Shiv Nadar University, you guys have to think what you should be doing in terms of skilling and knowledge at the university,
So we can
including in
use it,
computer science, so that we can use people well, and we will help in seeing Gen X and etc. etc. Right? So I asked that question that, attitudinally let me know, because all learning is knowledge, skill, and attitude. So everything that you need, let's say at the workspace or in anything related to adult life, is around knowledge, skill, and attitude, right? So the attitude part, interestingly, is majorly shaped between parenting and school.
Correct.
So therefore, what do you do at school, right? So one is, of course, have these parent, engagements and help them with the parenting, and you have this conversation. But at school, there is a set of things which are obvious. There is a lot of things which are not so obvious, which I will also talk about. The obvious ones are deep immersion in sport, a deep immersion in any passion that you can pick up and say, I'm going to excel at it. Because that sets a particular purpose and sets a particular resilience inside you, that I want to excel here, I've got to do that. And any child who's 10, 11 years old and says basketball is my life or football is my life, has got that right. Because then that path gets clear. It could be, in cases, it could be chemistry, it could be physics, it could be molecular biology, it could be like any such thing. But school has a role to play in providing that opportunity, saying that I will help you discover your passion and your deep interest, and then push you towards it. Second is doing things which are project based. So in 10th class, our entire 10th across schools gets a 6-month project where they are told go and solve a real life, real world problem. It's like Shark Tank. You select your team, you select your problem, and you come through the hoops and come to the final round, which is an annual round. Many of you are not going to come through, but go out there and do it. And then you're pushed back by saying, horrible, go back, get back to the drawing board. This is through the 10th class board exam year.
Right.
But we do it across the school. The winning team goes to CERN.
Okay.
For the last 3 years. Earlier, they used to get iPads, etc. But it's much more than what you get when you win. It's the whole opportunity and the resilience and the collaboration and the thinking that you have to do. So examples could be, one was, and this is like a big event, right? We get jury from the outside who come, and it's like a big event which is done at school. A group of 6 boys came up with saying low cost module for a mother to know whether the baby is kicking or not when she's pregnant. So 15-year-old, and we said, why is this all boys team doing this? And it was interesting that they said, I saw my cousin struggling, and we realized that we needed to press. So there are lots of such things. There are another very interesting one was a group of kids said, these dogs close to the railway station have lost their limbs and they can't walk around. Say they did 3D modeling of making artificial paws for dogs.
Oh.
And they went out, did the models, checked it, came back, remodeled it, and did the after video of the dogs running around, or use, crutches for elderly people in homes. So you have to go out there to the home and find out what is the struggle of people getting up and going down steps, etc. Make those crutches which adjust to the steps, etc. So, but broadly, project-based work.
It's a more experiential.
It's experiential, and so that sets you to say that I have to also be thinking of what sort of things I can solve.
So, do you think the famous case study method at the Harvard and a lot of other successful, well-known institutions? How do you see 10 years down the line, will schools become project-centric, experiential education provider, the good ones, or it'll remain like this, your nursery to 12th, curriculum finishing, semester, etc., come every day, 5 days a week? Do you think there will be a disruption, or there is a possibility of disruption? Because now you can actually sort of curate and create an absolutely new narrative that you need to come to school 2 days and rest of the 3 days, this is what you're going to do, so that you are having a uninterrupted project work. I would rather have you visit 100 factories in a year than 100 classroom lectures a year. Do you think something as disruptive as this could be a possibility going forward? Or do you think, this regimen is needed, let's leave it to the colleges to do this job?
Actually, again, at a national level, because India is such a vast country, as I said, 250 million children go to school.
True.
My army life has taken me to places like Tooting, where there's an aircraft which lands. It's on the Arunachal border where the Brahmaputra enters India. And I've been to those schools. And those children in white shirts and tie, without a road to connect to anywhere, they were doing the same type of schooling that you would do in Delhi. And I wondered, why are they doing this schooling? Where are these children going to go to? So I think at an India level, the major change, which is a huge policy structure change, should be that by 11th class, we should decide that is this now vocational education for the children who will go into the vocations that they need to be trained for,
which used to be the metric pass and
used
then
to be there.
into
Only probably Germany, Singapore, etc. still do that in a very large scale. They go
Correct.
straight in, or
Absolutely.
Finland, etc. But that's the model that India should be following, because after elementary education or primary and elementary education, which is your writing and your reading and your basic mathematics, etc., it should be preparing you for skill that which is needed in the environment that you're living or in and around the environment. And that's what we should be doing, right? But among the city schools and, like a Gurgaon school, etc., I think a lot of that type of work should happen at colleges, because what is to be understood at school level, it's also the growth phase of a human being. You're going to be 5, 7, 10, 15, your life is very different. So the sort of skills that you need at those stages, including your social and emotional skills, happen through the 5 day at school, little bit of bullying I had a little difficulty, and somebody said no to me, and I'm not so attractive. And I think it's part of that growth, which is where the community of a school is still very relevant. It's not about saying I will work towards the knowledge and the skill which is required for my career, because you're still 15 and 16 years old. So while one part of it should be towards the vocation that you want to choose, but a lot of it is through the many other aspects of growing together as a community, which happens in a school extremely well. So I think there was a phase in COVID when a lot of people said, are schools now done and is it all going to be online?
Yeah.
Can I start? A lot of people did talk about, I think schools are still going to be here. The brick and mortar stuff is going to continue, because there's a lot which happens in that age of our lives, which is necessary for us to be resilient and adaptable and, open to diversity.
And of course, meaningful engagement for kids for a longer hours to let parents have a
Yes.
sigh of easy breathe.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we've spoken about this, but I think the important element here, I think if we could just touch upon, the teachers and the teaching and the training of teachers and getting the brightest of the talent into the academia, where are we lacking there? Because I remember, I mean, my father tells me that, at his time, the kind of teacher that he would, interact with were cut from a different fabric. I mean, the amount of involvement and the intensity of intent towards education was very, very different. Now it's become a meaningful engagement while I have a skill, a second income for the house, and an opportunity to make a difference to the capacity or limitation that I have. So how do we bring more seriousness and far better talent? I mean, can teaching become a day zero at IIT placement?
Yeah, I suppose, I think, as I said, there are many Indias out here.
Yeah.
It's not just
It's just not one India there.
Noida, India we are talking about. Interestingly, the rural India government teacher is among the best paid in her society. They are paid from 60,000 to 1 lakh rupees.
In the government bands.
In the government bands. So, and when you look at the society that they live in, that's extremely good salary. So getting into a government teaching job, you're extremely well paid. So then I would say the problems there are different. They are culture, they are about leadership,
Training,
it's about
forward-looking,
systems, and it's about training. See, it's the same thing about training. If training is seen as some horrible thing to do, and it's not exciting, it's not something which is pushing yourself to learn.
Or training as, you don't know this, I'm going to tell you that, is rather than, make a better version of you.
And there has to be incentives in many ways. It's not just financial incentives, there are many incentives. So one day I did a mentee, the mentee. So I did a Menti with all the teachers. And the best part about Menti is that the phone is in your hand, the poll is going to happen in front of you. You don't know who's doing it, and that person also knows it's anonymous. So you be prepared for the worst. So I put up a Menti, say, what excites you about coming to Shiv Nadar School as a teacher? Pay and privileges, good lunch, closest to my home, or the opportunity to grow and learn. And it was heartening, it holds your breath a little bit, but it's heartening that the opportunity to grow and learn was the highest
That's amazing.
among all of them. It was anonymous, they could, be as truthful as they could.
Yeah.
But it's about building a culture which says that learning and growing is something which excites me. So while the RTE, the National Education Policy, mandates 50 hours a year, Shiv Nadar School teacher does 204 hours a year of training.
Wow.
And they enjoy it because we get some of the best people. They anchor many sessions themselves. We have stay back Saturdays, we have extended weekdays, but it's also the culture which says, and there is this national, now it's more than national. Ramya runs this incredible teachers accreditation test called CENTA. There are 200,000 teachers who appear. 86% of Shiv Nadar School teachers appear for it. 86%. In the top 10 of this year, 6 are from Shiv Nadar School, including the now international topper.
Amazing.
Right? And so therefore you're pushing each other. You're saying if Gopal is in the social studies thing and he's not teaching, I better be there too. So you look at each other, you push yourself, you get on stage, you get recognized, and people say center topper, etc. So there is that pride that you say, I excel at what you do, which is again a huge thing from the military. You know, the military life gamifies everything. We didn't know the word.
Gamifies everything.
We didn't know this word when I was in the military, but I realized the National Defense Academy fully gamified, Indian Military Academy fully gamified. Go to a brigade or a division, everything is gamified. Everything is competition with numbers, right? Everything. Your firing is gamified. Your running is gamified. Your basketball is gamified. Your what's called your platoon weapons thing. Your engineering obstacles, everything is gamified. So it's also that culture of pushing yourself by saying we want to be the best. And I think that culture, if that's what's needed to be set across, and I think, for example, the Delhi government has done a great job in trying to do that with teachers and get them up and going with teaching and learning. But it's a huge challenge now to make teachers feel. And in spite of the fact that we consider ourselves fairly good with the pay and perks, teachers are still underpaid. They're still underpaid across India. I mean, for what they do. And what's the answer in the public, in a private sector? Raise the fees again. You can't keep raising the fees, right? Yeah. So it's also going to challenge the parents by being able to do that. And how many Shiv Nadar foundations are there who are supporting education by opening up the coffers? So it's a big challenge, I think, for India to figure. But I think if we respect the teachers, many of them will do stuff because of the fact that it's a respectful profession and things like that. But I think these are all very challenges that we have. But it's about the culture of learning and the culture of excelling, which should become part of a school for people to say that let's up the standards.
No, that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. So if you were to, give a word of caution and advice to the parents, students and teachers of today, what would that be?
So Oscar Wilde said, advice I love because I pass it on. It's of no use to me. So I'm always cautious about giving advice. But I think I recently shared this with parents that parenting and leadership is a bit like flying a kite.
How do you say that?
Okay, so just think of it. When you are flying a kite, you have to hold it tight because you don't want it to fall down. and scrape itself.
Yeah.
But if you don't let it loose, it's not going to fly high.
It's not going to go up.
It's not going to go up. So parenting is a lot about that at every age. Whether it's
The balance around.
the balance that you need to let children be and not too controlling and let them be a little bit, but just sort of know what's happening in their lives is fundamental to parenting. It's fundamental to a lot of things in life, but it's very fundamental to parenting. And children, I think, for all their concerns, when you look at a 14-year-old, you can imagine the stresses on a 14-year-old. Okay, you're growing up, you're a teenager, you're looking at how am I seen, how am I visible, how am I looking, what clothes do I wear, examination, parental demands, teachers' demands, all the multiple various things that I'm doing. But I think, if I were to talk as a 65-year-old to a 15-year-old, with 50 years a light year between us, it's about the fact that what I've learned from life is, what I started with, that life's a series of choices that you make, but it's also about the chances that you get. There are some parts of life you cannot control. You got to stay loose and not be too demanding on yourself, and be joyous in the fact that some good things will happen and some things will sort of happen by chance. And I think that's the joy of life,
Absolutely. And my last question to you would be for people who are excited by the idea of education. They feel that this is a true give back to society. They want to set up education institute, or they're looking at, driving some of the education initiatives. So what would be, your word of caution, advice, or experience share after having worked with, one of the most respected entrepreneurs, philanthropists like Mr. Nadar, and a brilliant team, that you guys built together. So what would be the, thoughts for them?
So, that's the sort of congruence I think I would draw from my military life to my life in education, that the parallels are actually quite uncanny. I never felt purpose or, what's the purpose, either when I was in Siachen or in the line of control or in Kashmir, as I have that same sort of question when I'm inside a class or inside a school. You never are questioning purpose. So the joy of what you do, as compared to selling Pepsi somewhere in Punjab and getting a lot of money, for example, I don't need Pepsi, anything. But the joy that you get in institution building and the legacy that you can have, right?
Create.
Your own company and your father's reputation. When I was young, I remembered what your father did. So there is a legacy in an education institution which will go, like Mr. Nadar says, well beyond the life of a founder.
Correct.
You will always be remembered for the wonderful institution that you set up. And the joy of putting that magic together, of putting something which is valuable to society, to students, to teachers, it's an incredible joy. It doesn't come easy. It will have its challenges. Land costs are huge. Compliances are always a challenge. But I think the sheer joy of what you can do in your respective society outweighs every other challenge. So it's sort of well worth doing.
Okay, before we let you go, last question. If you hadn't, taken the eventual final choice of joining the armed forces, what other career option, would that have been for you?
Yeah, for sure, education and teaching. I've so enjoyed being a teacher, and the joy of feedback, for example. One of the things we do at Shiv Nadar School is we never compromise on not writing reflections, because writing reflections is not about whether the teacher did a good job. It's about making the person think and saying through the busy day, okay, this is what I learned. So some of my most treasured feedbacks are from children who, the last one I did was with not last one, many, but the grade 2 once the teacher called me up and said, we are doing a series on food, and students are asking, what do soldiers eat in high altitude and difficult areas? Can you come and take a class? I thought it'll be like 30 children. I have suddenly found 150, all of class 2 sitting in a mini auditorium, and and I did this class, and it taught me so much. Because I talked to 7-year-olds, and now they are about 13 or 14. I'm going to go back and give them their cards and say, look what you wrote, including, I told them that if you don't eat good food, you will get smallpox like Gopal sir. And somebody wrote smallpox he should not have. Or that in Siachen, they draw helipads with chocolate powder, which is true.
Oh, is it?
Because there's lots of chocolate powder nobody wants to eat, and you have to color the snow. So we use chocolate powder.
Spray the chocolate.
So chocolate powder. And so what children learn from that engagement that you have is wondrous.
Yeah.
It can be so different, so reflective, so deep. Like I told you about what's the purpose of life. You don't expect 10-year-olds to come up with that. Right. So it's a very joyous way. So it's certainly teaching. That's
Absolutely.
what I would like. Yeah.
Teaching it is.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you
For taking out time
Thank
today.
you.
Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
I don't know if we did justice to all the brilliant questions that was put together, because whoever has done this has done a terrific job of, your team has done a great job of putting this together.
No, thank you so much.
But you should do one with Mr. Nadar. We got to figure this.
No, we should do that. We should absolutely do that, and I'll, take you on
Even
for that
Roshni,
opportunity.
Even Roshni.
I've heard a lot. I think I must.
Yeah.
Great, fantastic.
Chalo, thank you.